Hello, so this video is for the freshmen. This is for quiz 2.2.2, or the fourth quiz of Unit 2. This quiz is about responding to challenging perspectives. As you know, in the world, different people have different opinions. Usually that's not a problem, because this world, it just takes all kinds of people to run it. But sometimes somebody's perspective is harmful or biased. Getting angry or ignoring hurtful perspectives may not be the best approach when someone is saying something that is biased or unfair or false. I say may not because I know that in some circumstances when the other person is being completely unreasonable, you can't just sit down and talk with them. But when something hurtful is said because a person hasn't learned better yet, it's probably most effective to find out why they think the way they do and then try to convince the person using rhetoric. Remember logos, ethos, and pathos, that their thinking is based on harmful or false ideas. Think about how Martin Luther King Jr. Worked to end racism. Remember, there are three kinds of rhetoric. There's logos, which is logic. It's where you're basing your information on logical things. Then ethos, ethics, or a sense of right and wrong, morality. And then there's pathos, which is emotion. When you are effectively using rhetoric, you know your audience. You know what kinds of rhetoric to use in order to convince your audience. And it's important for us to be able to recognize when we're being biased. Now, bias is not necessarily a bad thing. If I go in for a job interview, I'm going to be biased and believe that I am the best candidate for the job interview. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm biased towards the Uinta River Warriors, for example. I like the Uinta River Warriors more than somebody else's team, even though the other team isn't necessarily bad. I just like them more because I'm biased. So bias isn't necessarily a bad thing. So the important thing is that we can recognize that we're biased. It's not a universal truth that the Uinta River Warriors are better than other people. So that's not an objective truth. Okay, so we're going to continue that what I was telling you before. Well, anyway, so if you can recognize that you're biased, it can help you understand why we think and act as we do. So there are such things as what are called objective truths, that are things that are true regardless of what our opinions are. For example, 2 + 2 is 4. That's an objective truth. And 2 + 2 will always be 4, always, no matter what. So that's an objective truth. And then back to bias. Sometimes we have extreme biases, and those are called stereotypes. And those can be really harmful, and they're not true. They can't be, because like if you were to say all of this group of people, you're probably going to be wrong, because there are so many of whatever type of people that they can't all be that way. For example, I once heard the phrase, all Navajos like watermelon. Really? Every single Navajo on the planet likes watermelon. Really? That's a stereotype. So a stereotype is a belief about personal attributes of the individuals of a group and that they're all exactly the same. And they can be harmful, and they're not accurate, because people are different, because we're human beings. So anyway, now I'm going to talk about two types of reasoning called deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning and you'll see this in your study, but deductive reasoning is a method that starts with a provable fact, a big provable fact, like birds have feathers. That's a fact. That's an objective truth. Then it draws a specific conclusion based on that fact. So all birds have feathers, or all birds have wings. That's an objective truth, unless there's like a birth defect or an accident or something. But so birds have feathers. Ostriches have feathers. Ostrich is a bird, and so therefore ostriches must have feathers. Or birds have wings. Ostrich is a bird, therefore ostriches have wings. They may not necessarily fly, but they all have feathers and wings. I'm going to tell you about logical fallacies now, and then I'll get to inductive reasoning in a second. So a logical fallacy, and this is going to talk about this in the study guide for the quiz, so you need to know what that is. A logical fallacy is when you say something is true that is just not true. It's not an opinion. It's you're just plain wrong. It's like saying 2 + 2 is 3. That's a logical fallacy. It's not so. So that's what a logical fallacy is. Now, inductive reasoning is where you, so deductive reasoning is where you take this big truth and you find a little specific thing because of that truth. Birds have feathers. Ostriches are birds, so therefore ostriches have feathers. So that's deductive reasoning. It's going from big to small. Inductive reasoning is the other way around. It's where you go from small to big. So inductive reasoning starts with a specific idea and to reach a more general conclusion. Generally, deductive reasoning is more reliable because it starts with a big truth and it goes down to a little truth. But inductive reasoning is, there are times when it's good to use inductive reasoning. Here's this little truth. Here's another little truth. Here's another other little truth. Ostriches have feathers. Seagulls have feathers. Pigeons have feathers. It can then be concluded that birds have feathers is an example of inductive reasoning. And so hopefully that will help you with quiz 2.2.2, which is your fourth quiz of Unit 2 for the freshmen.